slides are not advancing. There we go. So I am currently the Deputy Director of CASA. I've had kind of a patchwork quilt of a career. I graduated from Goucher with an individualized interdisciplinary studies major in sociology, psychology, women's studies, and Spanish, which is a mouthful to say that I'm really indecisive. And my first job out of college was actually working with CASA. I worked with CASA as a case supervisor doing more direct service early on, moved around the country and held several different positions, including a job at the University of Pennsylvania where I was recruiting for their English language program. Kind of the common thread through most of the positions that I've held has been marketing and developing relationships. And I can talk more about that as the presentation goes on. I also, when I was working at the University of Pennsylvania, I got a marketing certificate from the Wharton School of Business. And so when I came back to Maryland, I got back involved with CASA, and as the Deputy Director, I'm responsible for a lot of different things. As we'll be talking about in the nonprofit world, a lot of times you wear a lot of different hats. So I'm in charge of all of the fundraising, development, grant writing. I do some stuff with HR, policy. I do some work with accounting and, you know, stuffing envelopes, whatever is needed depending on the day.
Hi guys, I'm Emma Rabden, and I'm currently the volunteer coordinator at CASA Prince George's County, and I graduated from Goucher in 2015 with a sociology degree. And I think my biggest highlight for me while I was at Goucher was definitely my ability to study abroad twice, specifically to conduct a field research project while I was in India on a topic that meant a lot to me at the time. And
so let's get started by talking a bit about what CASA does. CASA stands for Court Appointed Special Advocate. We work with kids in foster care because of abuse and neglect, and the way that we do that is actually by training volunteers from the community. We have volunteers from all walks of life. Certainly we have volunteers who have been in social work, law enforcement, law, but then we have people from a range of occupations, and we train them and supervise them, and they are matched with one child who's in foster care, and they are dedicated to that one child and providing a voice to them. They get to know the child, the significant individuals in the child's life, like their foster parents, biological parents, teachers, and they make recommendations to the court about what's in that child's best interest. There are a lot of different people involved in a case that is in foster care. The children do have an attorney, but most often that attorney is representing what that child wants. So, you know, a 6-year-old who might want to go back to their mom who is still having issues with substance abuse, that's what the attorney is going to argue for, whereas CASAs are advocating for what's actually in the child's best interest. And I certainly would be happy to answer any questions that folks have specifically about what CASA does. One of the highlights that I wanted to express about CASA, though, is that it is an independent nonprofit organization. There is a Maryland CASA Association, there's a National CASA Association, and those organizations provide support, but each CASA program operates independently as a nonprofit. So regardless of where you are currently living or want to settle, it's certainly something that you can look into, both in terms of volunteer work or working for a CASA program. There are a variety of positions that are held by somebody who works at a CASA program. Definitely the most common position is a case supervisor. Those are the people who supervise the volunteers and provide advice and guidance to them. Of course, there's executive directors, administrative assistants, positions like mine, positions like Emma, where she's working with the volunteers and doing marketing. So that's just to show you how in any nonprofit organization, there's going to be a variety of positions, not just the folks who are doing the direct service. And that is the link for CASA nationally. That's the National CASA Association. So if you are interested in a CASA program, you can go there and learn about the one closest to you. And then, of course, I wouldn't be a good marketer if I didn't include our website as well. So what is working in the field of nonprofits? one definition that I found was that nonprofits are organizations that work to improve the common good of society in some way, typically through charitable, educational, scientific, or religious means. There are a lot of ways in which nonprofit organizations are similar to any business. You know, all of us need to bring money in to keep lights on and pay personnel. There are things that are very business, have to lease copy machines and rent office space and everything just like any other business would do. I think that the main driver of the difference is that in the business world and the for-profit world, the bottom line is just that. It's the profit that you're making, you know, interest for shareholders, et cetera, whereas in the nonprofit world, the bottom line is the impact that you're having on the issue that you're addressing or the population that you're working with. So it's really the mission that divides the two. In the nonprofit world, as we talked about, there's a variety of different positions you can hold. There are also a range of issues that I would never begin to be able to cover that you can address. There's everything from health, human services, animal rights, environment. If you can think of an issue, there is a nonprofit out there attempting to improve, change, drive some sort of policy. And within that realm, there's also a variety of ways that you can be working on an issue. It can mean that you are doing direct service, where you are out directly working with, you know, homeless people on the streets, or it can be as background as doing research or evaluation. There's really no end to what you can do in the nonprofit world. For the most part, if you can think of a position in the business world, there's going to be a parallel in the nonprofit world, including accountants, IT, graphic designers, anything you can think of. So the good, the bad, and the good. I wouldn't want to end on a negative note, but I will start on a negative note. Some of the disadvantages of working in the nonprofit world. Results can be hard to see. On a day-to-day basis, there are often times where either because of the position that you serve in or just the general work of what you do, it can be hard to find where the change is happening. And it's often not until we take a step back to tell other people about the work that we do that we really reflect on the impacts that we're having and the change that we're driving. But it can get frustrating on a day-to-day basis, especially if you're working in positions like Emma's and mine, where we're not working directly with the kids. We're doing things that are essential to the organization operating and completing the mission, but we're not in court with the kids. We're not going out to advocate at IEP meetings, and so it can be hard to see what's actually happening. And so it's important to be able to take a step back and really think about the impact the organization overall is having. Definitely can have frustrating work conditions. I think Emma and I are pretty fortunate in that, you know, we're working for an organization that's well established. We're getting ready to celebrate our 15-year anniversary, and we still hit bumps in the road, but for the most part, you know, we have working computers and we each have our own desk and office space. But certainly working in the nonprofit world, there can be frustrating work conditions. I've heard stories about people starting their first day and their computers on the floor because they couldn't get them a desk yet. You know, there are a lot of times when you have these goals that are great and great program ideas, and it can't happen until a grant comes through. So those types of things can get frustrating. There's definitely a high burnout rate. I think that, you know, the nonprofit world has some commonalities amongst teachers in terms of it being hard work, and there being a lot of people who end up leaving either just because of the frustrations we've talked about. You know, people leave the nonprofit world every day to go to the for-profit world to be able to make more money doing similar job functions that they're doing in the nonprofit world. But then the stakes are also really high, and that's one of the good things about the work that you're doing, that it is meaningful, but it can also be stressful. If you forget to file paperwork, it might mean a client can't get into a housing program because they're missing a deadline, and that pressure is real, and it's something that you're definitely always aware of. fundraising, what I spend the majority of my time doing. It's a reality in the nonprofit world. Unfortunately, nonprofits don't receive a lot of support from the government. There is also not a lot of multi-year grants. You know, donors don't necessarily give to the same organization every year. So you're constantly out there fundraising. And, you know, depending on your job, you will be involved with this to a lesser extent, but it's always something that you're aware of, either because the new person that you were hoping would get hired who was going to take some of your workload can't be hired because a grant didn't come through, or you're asking your friends for the 15th time to come out to a dining event where part of the proceeds will benefit the organization you're working with. It's definitely something that is always on folks' mind in the nonprofit world. But there's a lot of good. You work with a lot of interesting people. Just in our office, we have a lot of interesting people with a range of experience. You know, we have lawyers, we have social workers, we have people from several different countries. It's a really interesting environment where you're going to work with people who are dedicated to the mission for a variety of different reasons. There's also a lot of great growth opportunities. I would not be in the position that I am today if it weren't for the opportunities that I had early on. The first time that I worked with CASA, it was just me and the executive director. There were days that I was bored and the executive director was working on grants, and I'd say, hey, you know, I went to Goucher, so I'm a great writer, and I had editing experience, and so she let me help. And that kind of, you know, just evolved to the point that for a while I was doing independent consulting and doing grant writing for other nonprofit organizations, and that opportunity wouldn't have existed in a different type of company. In the nonprofit world, it's very flat. You know, you're going to have access to the executive director in a way that you wouldn't in a business. A lot of people in the business world may never even meet the CEO of the company that they work with, whereas in the nonprofit world, you are constantly hearing about things and have access to opportunities and to decision makers that you wouldn't elsewhere. And that goes along with the next point, which is about mobility. You know, both within an organization, there's definitely the possibility of changing positions. There are people who start off as a volunteer for an organization, and then later they're suddenly the deputy director or the development director. There's also mobility within the sector where, you know, for example, just using my own background as an example, doing development work, I could be working for an Alzheimer's organization or an animal rights organization or a university foundation. You know, there's a lot of skills that are very transferable. But also within the nonprofit world, you know, there, I think, is a much greater propensity for people to give their employees opportunities to learn new skill sets or to try different things out. As I mentioned earlier, the flatter organizational structure, you're definitely going to have access to the decision makers and have more responsibility. There's also a value for business skills. So if you get started off in the business world and want to make the switch, I would say, with the exception of direct service, with direct service, there's definitely a propensity to want to see experience related to what you're doing. But otherwise, as I mentioned, you know, if you're an accountant in a for-profit industry, you can easily make that switch to a nonprofit without missing a beat. And last but not least, the opportunity to change the world. Certainly, you can make changes and develop new technologies in the business world, but the opportunity to change people's lives or change the conversation about a particular issue is unparalleled to that you experience in the nonprofit world. Getting started. The first place to start definitely would be with Goucher. When I posted the position for the position that Emma now holds, I put it on Goucher, and other alumni and businesses and organizations are doing the same thing. So you should definitely start off checking there. Idealist is kind of the go-to for nonprofit jobs. Unfortunately, a lot of nonprofit organizations cannot afford to post on big job search websites. Idealist is reasonably priced, so most of us will post there. But searching nonprofit websites directly is definitely going to yield greater results when it comes to smaller nonprofits, just because of, as I said, the cost of posting positions. And so to get to those nonprofits, you can start off by finding some of the industry associations. For example, if you wanted to do something in child welfare, you could be starting with the Child Welfare Association. There are a lot of different associations, either at local or national levels, that will list their members, and then you can go from there once you have kind of established an issue base, and then go out and research those nonprofits independently. For higher level careers, there are some big name websites and magazines out there that will post positions, but those are going to be more like development director, executive director level positions. But a great way to learn about the jobs is to sign up for the newsletters and link to some of these organizations on social media so that you are getting constant updates about job listings. For example, in our area, there's an organization called the Human Services Coalition that has members from all over the county that are nonprofits serving human services, and they would list any kind of positions. And so their newsletter would be a great source of information. I know that when you are particularly getting ready to graduate or just graduated, education and research is not necessarily what you want to be thinking about, but in any job search, it's important to learn about the industry. Sign up for newsletters, read the blogs. There's a great blog called Nonprofit with Balls that is hysterical and puts out a posting every Monday, but it really gets at the heart of some of the issues that you will find in the nonprofit world. There are LinkedIn groups. Some of them you won't be able to join because you have to be working for a certain type of organization, but there are open groups out there that you can join. Sign up for free webinars when you can find them. Booz Allen Hamilton has a great nonprofit speaker series. I'm not sure whether individuals are eligible to attend. However, they have all of their previous webinars online for free, so you can just go on there and look at them, and they'll talk about issues like dealing with funders or overcoming economic downturn issues that are helpful for you, even if it's nothing more than a talking point in an interview. And once you know what issues you want to work on, start reading the industry newsletters and research findings so that you really know what is happening in that industry and can speak intelligently about it in an interview or even just referencing things in a cover letter. Definitely talk to alumni in the industry. Casey is your go-to for that and can link you up with alumni who are doing this work. And I can't underestimate the power of networking. A lot of people that I talk to found their jobs through networking, word of mouth. Either they were out there looking or they might have already been in a job, but somebody knows them and says, hey, we have this position available. What do you think about applying for it? I know that it's something that everybody talks about, but it's because it's so important. I know for those of you getting ready to graduate and recent grads, graduate school is always one of the questions these days. It's a tricky one because on one hand, the job market in all industries is definitely more competitive these days, and so graduate degrees give you an edge. However, graduate school is not overemphasized in the nonprofit world. I just did a quick search on Idealist, and there were 7,000 jobs that required a bachelor's, but only about 1,200 that required a master's. And that's not to say that it, is not necessary at all. You might be applying for the same job that other people with their master's are applying for, and you're competing with them. But I think what has the greater value is actually experience. And so anything that you can do to get experience through volunteering, interning is going to give you an advantage.
The search process and networking. So I can't stress how amazing it is that I was and you guys are able to be in such a close community and environment of people and staff and professors that are willing to help you on such a personal level, and how important it is to utilize that and to utilize their ability to work with you one-on-one, whether it's writing a resume, connecting you with alumni or other people in the community. And I guess a bit about my story and how I am sitting here with Karen now. I had a very close relationship with one of the alumni directors while I was at Goucher. And when I was getting ready to graduate, I was so freaked out and had no idea what I wanted to do or where I wanted to go. I knew that I really wanted to enter the nonprofit world, and I knew that I wanted to do something that utilized my 4 years of a sociology degree. And so I met with him, and we kind of sat and chatted about my future and where I saw myself and what I wanted to do and the kind of people I worked best with. And he was like, Emma, I have an amazing person for you. You have to meet her. You guys will get along great. So I reached out to Kara, and we got lunch one day, and I really had no intention of or no idea of working with her or getting a job with her. It was more of kind of a lunch to talk about her process of post-graduation and where I wanted to go and questions that I had about my life and leaving Goucher. And I walked away with a job application. And
so don't hesitate to reach out and have those conversations. I think Emma had the right approach where she was coming to me, not asking me for anything or asking for a job. She was just looking for information and wanted to hear more about my story. And it just was a great coincidence, I guess, that I also had this position available, and it worked out really well. And so you might not be as lucky as we were to immediately find that match, but even getting the information about how people got into the industry is helpful. And also it comes back to that, that networking that we were talking about earlier, where people will have you in the back of their head. So maybe they don't have a position available, but maybe the next day they go to a networking event and somebody's talking about a position that they have open, and they can call you up and say, hey, there's this great position available.
And even if they don't have the ability to connect you with anyone or get you a job, just the option to speak to someone that has also graduated from Goucher and is also succeeding in their own life and succeeding in their own degree, and just that ability to talk to someone that is from the same place you are is so helpful, even if they don't connect you to your next step.
And it's also very reassuring to know that you will be able to get a job. One piece of advice is to put down the selfie stick. This picture is actually a friend of mine who used to work at Goucher. Thankfully, this is not her on a daily basis. This is a Halloween costume. But it just highlights the point that you really need to be cautious about what is out there. I am very grateful there was no social media when I was in high school and college, and I feel bad for you guys that you have all of this information out there. But know that potential employers will research you. They will cyberstalk you on Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever they can find you, and you need to be aware of what is out there. You don't always have control over what's out there, so be prepared to explain anything that they might find, but also control as much as you can. Be cautious at spring break and, encourage people to keep their smartphones in their pockets, but definitely be aware that we can find you. So in that regard, also don't complain about your current job on social media. That's another thing that potential employers will see and be very turned off by, because if you're negative about the job you have, they'll be concerned that you'll be negative about the job that they could potentially give you. On the positive end, social media does give you the opportunity to reach out, learn more about industries, but also put yourself out there. I know that these days people talk about personal branding a lot. Use the Goucher skills that you have to craft a great resume. Make sure that you're doing great customized cover letters and not including the same cover letter with every resume that you send out. Keep your LinkedIn profile up to date, portfolio if it's relevant to the type of work that you want it to do. One of the takeaways for Emma and I is the value of service. When I was at Goucher, I volunteered through Cause. I was working at what unfortunately no longer exists, but was a domestic violence transitional shelter for women and their children. I started off, I think, sophomore year volunteering through Cause, ended up doing my internship there, and ended up having my first paid job at that location, and that was all stemming just from an initial volunteer opportunity. So I can't downplay the importance of volunteering. And again, not to say that that is going to directly lead to a job, but your resume is going to be much more robust if you can show that you've been doing the work, even if it's not paid. And also outside of Goucher, once you've graduated, volunteer. I was talking to somebody who was in graphic design, and my biggest piece of advice for her was to volunteer for nonprofits. There is a lot of work that nonprofits need done that they can't afford to pay somebody to do, and so if you're willing to do some skill-based volunteering for them, you will provide a great benefit to them, but you will also have something that you can put on your resume. And even if you're not getting paid, you can list them as a client depending on the type of work that it is. Volunteer Match is, like Idealist, is kind of the go-to. It's where everybody posts volunteer opportunities. So certainly you can go to organizations directly, but if you're not sure where you want to volunteer, that's a great place to start. And don't be limited by the volunteer opportunities that are listed. If there's something that you feel you can offer and an organization you're really interested in, call them up and say, I have this skill set, you know, can you use me? And then where Emma kind of comes in is in the national service arena. There are a lot of great opportunities that we have to do service that will greatly expand your resume, provide some income, and also potentially an educational stipend. AmeriCorps and VISTA are domestic programs. They are typically 1 year. You receive a small living stipend. After you finish, you receive an educational stipend, and typically that can either be used to pay down a student loan from undergrad or towards graduate school. There are a range of opportunities within AmeriCorps and VISTA. For example, Emma is doing work that she'll tell you more about in building volunteer programs, whereas we also have a VISTA who is doing more capacity and program evaluation. So there are direct service opportunities out there. There are also things that are going to be more kind of strategic. There's also Peace Corps. It's a great opportunity. Again, you know, it's an international opportunity, but it's a great way to build up your resume, particularly for those of you who are not interested in going to grad school at all potentially, or at least not directly. It's a way to build up your experience to a point where you would have the opportunity to apply for a job in the field. We're actually getting ready to interview somebody right now who just is finishing up their Peace Corps service, and that is where she has the bulk of her experience, but what she did makes her a good candidate for the position. The traditional program is the 2-year model that many of you might have heard of, but there are also shorter-term programs that are kind of emergency response type programs, and there are also hybrid programs, so definitely look into those, and I'll let Emma talk a little bit more about what she's doing.
Well, first we'll talk a little bit about national service as a whole. And so national service for years was recognized related to the military and related to either sending troops off to war or military service. But now it's becoming much more recognized as community service in your own country and in your own community, such as programs like AmeriCorps and Volunteer Maryland, and these organizations that allow people and you guys to volunteer for them or to work for them in arenas that you are interested in and in issues that really do need help. And I think it's so important to work in national service in your own country in reminding yourself that we spend so much time kind of focusing on other countries' issues and places abroad when it really all does exist in your own backyard. And so AmeriCorps is an amazing opportunity for people to get involved with organizations that you are interested in, and they will work with you in finding out what you are interested in, whether it's helping to build houses, working as volunteer coordinators, or, I mean, really anything, when you name it, and it's an AmeriCorps program. So yeah, really getting involved on the home front and serving your country through community service has become so important in America, and is such a great opportunity for, like Kara has mentioned many times, for you guys to build resumes and to kind of develop more of an idea of what you want to do next, which kind of leads me into the next portion of like why you should be serving and the benefits of serving. So there's kind of both, there's two areas when I see benefits of serving. It's a personal level of satisfaction for yourself, and kind of like we just talked about, building your resume, helping you figure out what you're interested in, connecting with others, and then obviously the satisfaction of knowing that you're helping other people that are less fortunate than you. And then, of course, the benefits that you are providing to not only the people that these organizations are working with, but also the organization themselves. Nonprofits, like Kara has mentioned, does not often have the right funding or proper support financially, and so volunteering your time or choosing to serve for them allows them to save that money for different issues that are much more critical than hiring a supportive staff member, that allows you to kind of provide your skills and gives them a good employee, but also saves them money in that arena.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Emma's position here is a great example. She is responsible for volunteer recruitment, marketing, setting up training, a range of things that I definitely don't have the time to do, but this year at least we were not yet in the position to be able to hire for this position. We're hoping that next year it will actually be a full-time paid position, but we weren't there yet, and so this gave us an opportunity to be able to expand our recruitment without committing to hiring an additional person. So I did a little bit of crowdsourcing for this webinar and asked friends, because of course working in the nonprofit field, I have a lot of friends who work in the nonprofit field. So I asked people for their advice, and one of my friends said that sometimes working in nonprofit sucks, but just when you start questioning your choice in careers, the universe will remind you why you're doing this work. And I think that's important. There are definitely times where we all get frustrated. You know, I talked about the burnout earlier, but it is really valuable work, and at the end of the day, you really do feel that you are helping to change the world. I think that one of the feelings that I always had at Goucher and that I still get when I come back onto campus is that feeling of being able to change the world. And sometimes when you get caught up in the day-to-day stuff, you know, I have 2 kids, so there's wiping noses and cleaning up and everything like that, you can kind of lose sight of the fact that you always do have the power to make a difference and change the world. And working in a nonprofit, you're able to do that every day. Sometimes the hours are long. There are definitely times that you will do things that quote unquote fall below your pay grade, but it is, you know, it's all about doing things that are necessary for what the organization needs. And I think that's one of the other important pieces of advice that one of my friends offered, was to be willing to say, yes, I can help with that, even if it falls outside your job description, because you will be more valued as a team member, which will then give you those opportunities we talked about to expand your skill set or to get some upward mobility in the organization. Often, if not always, the pay is lower than in other industries. It's not to say that the pay always is terrible. Sometimes it is, but there are times that, you know, it's totally reasonable and livable, but most of the time it is going to be less than you would be making in the for-profit world. In my experience, the offset of that is that there is a better work-life balance. There are definitely times that you will work crazy hours and do things that are more physically grueling than what the job description ever explained. But on the upside, you know, we have a good vacation policy here. I work 2 days a week from home. My daughter was sick yesterday, so I worked from home to take care of her. And I think nonprofit organizations tend to be much more flexible because they recognize that it is hard work and you are getting paid less than what you might in another place. And as I mentioned before, you'll be doing interesting work, working with interesting people. You'll have different opportunities than you would elsewhere. And again, that opportunity to change the world. I know that it's already almost 12:40, so I want to leave time for questions if anybody has them. Casey, I can't see whether there are questions out there, so if you could let me know if anybody has questions, that would be great. So I have a couple of other points that friends shared with me that I'll just add on. Again, networking is always going to be one of the high points of advice. Being flexible is always important. Sometimes job descriptions change with funding sources. Be willing to step up and do things that are outside of your job description, but also be humble. Understand that, you know, particularly when you're just getting started off, you might be doing something that is very low level. You know, don't walk in expecting to be in charge and have a lot of responsibility. You do have to work your way up just as you would in any other industry. But as I said earlier, you're going to be able to do that faster and with higher likelihood in the nonprofit world. Also, don't be too set on what you think is right or what you think you want. A lot of times there are jobs out there that you had no idea existed, so be open to those opportunities, particularly as you're talking to people and networking with alums. Any questions?
So, Kara, I have unmuted everyone, so if you have any questions, feel free to jump in if you have audio. If not, you can type any questions that you have in the chat function as well.
Okay, so we have a question. Are there other support systems for people in nonprofits other than social media? Not 100% sure what you mean by that, so if you want to speak up or type, you can. In terms of opportunities for expanding your network, I think that so probably reaching out to some of the associations like I talked about earlier would be a good idea. Okay, so expanding the network. So I think trying to research the industry and starting to go out to events is a great way to expand your network. For example, the organization that I mentioned earlier, the Human Services Coalition, they have, it's like once a month, they have nonprofit speaker events. That would be a great opportunity to not only learn some stuff, but also to meet other nonprofit organizations. Anytime you hear about tabling events, where nonprofits might be out there to try to get people to donate workplace giving to their organization, they're out there, so those would be great opportunities to go out and start talking to the nonprofits. Also, you know, if graduate school is something that you're considering, there are a lot of graduate programs that provide great opportunities for networking. There are now master's programs specifically related to the nonprofit field. There's Masters of Public Administration, and most of those have a component in them where you're going out and doing site work. I hope that answered your question. Other questions? Okay, well, if there are no other questions, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much.
And certainly Casey has my contact information, so if anybody has questions specifically about CASA or about anything that we talked about, I'm more than happy to email with you or set up a phone call.
Thanks so much for your time today, Kara and Emma. I really appreciate you sharing this information with us. And once again, to everyone else, if you have any questions for Kara or for Emma, please feel free to contact me and I can help put you in touch.
Thank you, Casey.
All right, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.